everyone. Thanks for coming. Is this your first session that was not on the main stage? Is that right? Yeah, a round of applause for Sloss Tech. This is awesome for this conference to be here. We're very excited. Hopefully you're here for Unlocking Innovation. We're talking about engineering, AI, LLMs, those topics. Surely, probably will be one of the nerdiest sessions of the week, so good choice in being here. My name is Rob Dominguez. I'm a senior engineer at a company called Hasura. I lived in Birmingham for a very long time. My company's out of San Francisco, and I also am one of the co-organizers and leaders of Birmingham AI, which meets once a month at Innovation Depot and then also at Hardware Park. We have two groups. If you're interested in us, you can check out birminghamai.org, where we have more information about the group and the events itself. But I'm going to go ahead and begin by bringing our panel out on the stage to join me, and we'll kind of go one at a time. So I'm going to bring Daniel Church on out. Daniel? You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Daniel, so we have an idea of who you are, why you're up here?
So my name is Daniel Church. I work for a company called Vulcan Value Partners. So essentially we're stock pickers. So I run their machine learning team, train various models to be able to try to pick good investments.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll bring up next Praise Daramola.
My name is Praise Armola. I work with Harmony Venture Labs. It's a venture studio, and I work on the prototyping team. I make use of models. I don't really train them, but on the prototyping team, whenever we have an idea, we explore using AI to build it.
Awesome. And finally, we have Paul Richard.
Hey everyone, I'm Paul Richard. I work for a company called Nearform. We're a software development and design consultancy based out of Ireland, but I've been here in Birmingham for a few years. Absolutely love it. Yeah, and I've just been working with different companies, kind of helping out with anything they need.
Awesome. All right, we want to kind of give you an idea of what the session is going to be like for the next half hour or so. What we're going to do is I'm going to start by kind of gauging you all as an audience to kind of figure out where you are. What we want this to be is what we call, this is from my days as a teacher, a low floor, high ceiling session. And what that means is that we want the barrier to entry to be as low as humanly possible. So if you are not familiar with things like AI, large language models, these kinds of things, we're hoping that you get something out of this from an introductory perspective. If you are familiar, you've been developing software, you've been building your own models, whatever it may be. Hopefully you still learned something today as well, as we can kind of dive deeper into things. But just to kind of start out, before we jump into that part, I want to thank Sloss Tech, I want to thank Sidewalk, I want to thank all the sponsors that we have here, and these guys for coming up and joining me, and thank all of you for being here as well. So just to jump in, again, this is from my teacher days. We've always found that students never wanted to raise their hand because they were always a little self-conscious. So I'm going to ask you to pretend that you're a kid for a second. Take your hand, make a fist, and put it over your chest. And this is 0, this is 5. 0 means I have no idea what you're talking about. 5 means I know exactly what you're talking about. And this is like a nice little private way that we on the stage can see like where your confidence level is with certain topics, and we can kind of figure out where we're going to drive the discussion and drive the session. What we'll do is we'll use that little bit in the beginning to kind of drive the questions and answers that we have, and maybe get a little bit of overview in the beginning. But then we'll reserve the last 10 minutes or so for questions to come out of the audience. So anything that y'all want to ask, you'll have the chance to, and we'll stick around for a little bit as well so that you can ask those questions. But go ahead and make that fist, put it on your chest, ask you a few questions. All right, when it comes to ChatGPT, are you a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Where are we? All right, cool. Good deal. Some of us don't want to participate. That's cool. Oh, the guilt's seeping in now. Eye contact as well, yeah. All right, cool. All right, so that's our first one. All right, I'm going to take it a step further past ChatGPT. If I were to say the acronym LLM, are you a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5? All right, cool. All right. How many folks here are like self-described or self-identified engineers, developers, coders, programmers, that kind of thing? You can throw your hand up for that one. Like that's cool. Yeah, awesome. All right. Yeah, I think that's about all we had for kind of gauging the audience there. Maybe just to kind of give some background information about AI. It's been remarkable over the past 6 months to a year of what's come through. And really the majority of the public's perception of AI and that terminology is around really a subset of what we would term generative AI. So it's the ability for these systems, such as ChatGPT, which is a particular model of a larger organization called OpenAI, to generate content. And the way it does that is by taking what we call semantic similarity. So if I were to take the word cat and say, is it more similar to the word car or more similar to the word dog? These models under the hood can find the semantic similarity and distance between those two words and say cat and dog are more similar in terms of meaning at least. While in terms of lexicon, right, cat and car are much more similar because they're only one letter apart. Not to drive things too far down the generative AI side, but essentially what's happening is these models are very good at guessing what word should come next. And that's essentially what's happening with all of these. I'm going to pick on Daniel for a second here just because he has a machine learning background and can actually talk to us a lot about the mathematics and things under the hood, which we probably don't need to go into. But do you want to expand on kind of my nutshell definition of LLMs and vectorization, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I won't go too much into it, but I guess comparing this current kind of generation, what we refer to as AI, versus what people have traditionally trained as like machine learning, like I would say the big difference there is kind of implicit knowledge versus explicit knowledge. So like historically in machine learning, you needed a lot of data because essentially you're getting a model that doesn't know anything and you're trying to teach it based off of just pure pattern recognition, passing it examples of like positives and negatives of what you're trying to essentially optimize for. So in our case, trying to identify good businesses, there's not a ton of examples out there, so it's like pretty limiting. But now with essentially generative AI, with this ability to be able to identify semantic similarity, understand, at least to some extent, understanding quotes, concepts and be able to reason, now you're able to go at it from the other direction of explicitly defining what you want it to look for and then be able to produce it that way. So essentially just implicit training on examples versus explicit, you give it clear directions and it's able to go and act on those directions. So just a little bit of a differentiation there, at least.
Yeah, that's super helpful. We thought maybe the best way of kind of starting all these sessions off, or this session off today that we're doing, is just kind of give some background about things that we've built, things that we've done, and kind of give you some lessons learned so you don't have to make those same mistakes yourself when you're building things. And then from there, we can kind of evolve and talk about the future of AI, what's coming through from what we see from an engineering perspective. And then, again, let you folks ask some questions. So I'm going to lean all the way down towards Paul. And Paul, do you want to share something you've been working on recently with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that we've been working on lately that has to do with AI, which has been really exciting, is a project that we've been focusing on with my company is being able to intelligently detect, basically if something's happening within a system. So, you use software all the time, something goes down, somebody's hair is on fire when that's happening, right? And so we kind of been working on a tool to make sure that people can detect that as quickly as possible. And our primary focus has really been the audience is, well, hey, who are the people who can fix that, right? And so we collect this data, and it's pretty dense data, right? System logs, error messages, things like that. We try to collect it as quickly as possible and get it in front of the right person as quickly as possible, which is great and effective, but at the end of the day, there's people who need that software and it is not working for them. And so you can't hand, the end user or someone else within the business, oh, it's not working, here's a bunch of system logs, this is why, that's not particularly helpful. And so we've been able to use generative AI to really take this information, use this contextually to generate hey, this is what the problem is, here's some other human provided information of who's working on it and the kind of general context of what's going on, and then it is able to in real time be able to produce information to other members of the community and of the company, and has really allowed us to broaden our audience of this application we've been working on. So that's it. That's kind of the main thing for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Paul paints a very, I would say, altruistic picture of why he's using AI. I would think a lot of us became engineers because we're lazy, and we don't want to comb through those logs ourselves and figure things out. So if we can feed that all to a model and say, hey, derive what should be happening or who should be knowing about this, that makes our jobs easier. And
yeah, I would say it definitely started with people being oh, hey, don't forget, you have to update on Slack or send out an email to let everybody know what's going on. It's well, we can do that now automatically.
100%. All right, praise?
One of the projects that came out of our prototyping session last year was Describely. So it's a product description platform, and the goal going into it was, and we had this discussion about AI, whether AI is a feature or a full product. The goal was to make AI a feature in this application instead of making it the core of it. So what we did is we took the older models before it allowed you to get structured data, and we designed a way to get structured data out of it. That was something proprietary. Now it's not anymore because they just built that into it a few months later. But the solution ended up, the first solution we came up with was we pass it into the general model, and we get product descriptions, and we use that and visualize it to the user. The weird thing is we initially started as a chatbot. This was when everyone thought everything would fit in a chatbot. The thing is, chatbots are good for like informational purposes. They're not good for workflows. People still like to click buttons and do everything. And we just figured out a way to, when the users weren't using the chatbot, we just took it out and abstracted that all that into buttons and clicks, and you can move around. But in the platform, you can generate product descriptions. Now it has gone out of that and gone further, where if you ask it, if you give it your product image, it can actually do a background search, find what type of product you have, and go to the manufacturer's website, get information from there, and use all that to write your description, all from an image. So that was actually a cool thing to work on, but that's just one aspect. That part does a section of it, which is determining the product description, does like require AI, but everything around it, the infrastructure, gathering the data, a lot of that is still like technical work, which selfishly I enjoy. That's why it's designed that way. So.
Awesome. One thing that I noticed that Praise brought up in particular was this idea of like a general model. So I can assume that you all are using OpenAI under the hood in one of the GPT models. Is that right?
Well, actually, we switch it up depending on the use case. So we have several like passes. On the first pass, if like we try the first model, it doesn't work out, or it like switches to a different model, and we do that automatically, so the user doesn't know which one they're using. But we basically try to figure out what's optimal and what gives them the best description. So we're basically model agnostic.
Gotcha. Yeah. Very cool. Daniel?
Oh yeah. So essentially, my main job is being able to identify companies that we believe qualify for investment. So essentially, we have, okay, so we pick stocks. There's probably 20,000 in the world that we can invest in at any given time, and we have 10 analysts who are looking at those stocks all the time. If each one takes them a week or two to really get their head around and have an idea of whether or not they think it's undervalued, they think it's high quality, like maximum we're able to get through 400, 500 a year. So our idea is, with machine learning and with all the historical data we've had from our firm being around about 15 years, we can essentially train, based off of financials and qualitative information about the companies, a model to be able to replicate that in-between process of an analyst researching the company. So we use, it either qualifies or it doesn't, and we look at all 20,000 possible investable companies every single day. And we're not like a high-frequency trader. We're not moving stuff in the portfolio super often, but it's a good way for us to be able to keep a pulse on things, make sure we're not missing anything that's obvious, and help us prioritize our work. So that's more traditional machine learning application. Now we're actually using like some generative AI to help us in our actual process, which I won't get too much into, but a lot of it has to do with a lot of like scaffolding, which I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with like the concept. So it's more like an education concept to more Rob's background. So like as just a physics example, if I'm up here and I'm like kicking a ball off and someone's trying to run and catch it, you don't, if you're in physics class, they don't just give you that question overall. They break it down into like, how fast is the ball moving? Where's the person when it starts, and break it down into smaller chunks. And essentially, that's what we're doing with the AI with our research process, to then be able to bring it up into a bigger piece and have it do actually some useful analysis for us.
All right, cool. So we have about 10 minutes left. And before we jump into questions from the crowd, yeah, time flies, guys. But before we jump into the crowd, I just want to bring up one thing from kind of the last bit of the conversation that we had here. So from what Paul and Praise really pointed out, right, you can use kind of these off-the-shelf services like OpenAI. And for anybody that's been to ChatGPT's website and actually typed in the browser your question or whatever it is that you're asking it to generate for you, really that's what we're doing under the hood inside of code, right? So if we're engineering and building something, we just are essentially using the underlying plumbing that ChatGPT has. These are called APIs for those that aren't familiar. And we can access those things in the exact same way. We can choose which models we want to use, just like you can with OpenAI and that kind of thing. What Daniel's talking about from that first point in particular, though, is training a specific model, right? So you can feed data related to the context of whatever it is that your business outcome is and get better results from that model. Is that a succinct way of saying it?
Yeah, I would say it's a fair characterization. And actually, one of the reasons like generative AI is a big unlock for us, because when you only have those 20,000 companies, And we maybe have like 800 training labels. That is very limited to be able to do like a traditional machine learning model. And there's some ways to work around that. If you want to talk about it, talk to me afterward. But there's some ways to work around that. But then generative AI being able to describe your investment process and have it move from there is like far more effective in a lot of cases than having limited training data. That's where like a Facebook wins because they have more data points on me before I eat breakfast than I probably have over the course of like a 10-year history of a business.
Gotcha. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, please. We got a microphone that we can get to you right there.
Hey, so I had a question. Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me hold it further away. So I had a question for Praise. So I think it's really cool that you're swapping models out on the fly. But I was curious, what or who is dictating what is the best response from a particular model?
So with product descriptions, that's easy to find out. So if you pass in a product description, on the first pass, we have like a library of nouns and verbs that you can search. And you can also, the companies, we allow them to customize to have terms that they want in the product description and also set their own rules for the product descriptions. So at the first pass, we just have a manual process, or actually the first pass is an AI process. We just pass it through one of GPT-4 actually, and it says, does it match what they asked for and does it match the company's rules? If it passes that, then it can proceed. If it doesn't, then we run it again. Then we have a hard-coded pass, which is it checks for verbs and nouns and matches in the rules. And if keywords are missing, it passes it to the model. And if the same model keeps failing, then it just switches to a different model and tries to see if that's going to work. And that's basically a summary of the process.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys have sort of a hierarchy of models.
Yes.
Okay.
We on a primary level, we start with GPT-4, 4.0, or 4.0. Sorry, they keep saying it looks like 0 to me. I'm sorry. We start with GPT 4.0, but Claude is actually really good at like copywriting. For some reason, it's just good. It looks cleaner. It looks more like the way humans would speak. So we can, if GPT 4.0 fails, then we pass it to Claude. Those are the two that we primarily use. So GPT 3.5 for cheap, because it's cheap. So, and if that fails, we pass it to 4. Then if that fails, we pass it to Claude. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. One more. Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Have you tried that one yet?
I haven't tried it.
Okay.
I think the team, they're working on implementing it, but I haven't tried it personally.
Okay. I think you'll be impressed.
All right.
I think we have a microphone that we can get up there. It's coming from below.
Okay, so as a non-technical person, right, who's involved with a lot of software project and development, what are the key things about LLM that we should start focusing on if we're not coders or developers?
Can I take this one?
Yeah.
All right, cool. And y'all feel free to disagree with me completely. I've become very, very focused on the fact as an engineer, right? Because I remember when generative AI first started growing in popularity and people started becoming more and more aware of it, and especially when people started saying, look at the code it can produce for you, the freak out became of what's going to happen to our jobs and that kind of thing. All I can say at this point is it's a tool, and for your software projects that you work on, any other engineers that you work with, there's 100 other tools in the bag as well. And from what Paul and Praise have said in particular, right, from the projects they've worked on, this is only one portion of the software development lifecycle. This only fits into one part of the application itself. It is not the entirety of the application. My company was at Google Next a couple of months ago in Las Vegas, which is the big cloud computing conference they have out there. And, politely, it became like the team drinking game of to walk around to every booth and see what had AI in their tagline, because every company was like, we're AI now. No, you're not. You're absolutely not. It's part of your product, sure, and it can have some kind of authentic component within the software itself, but it is not your entire product.
I would say to add to that too, my advice to you would just be to just use it to solve whatever problem in your domain that you think makes sense. Because kind of like Rob was saying, it's like a tool like anything else, and you'll quickly kind of get skilled with that, and you'll kind of have a better understanding of its limitations and what it can do and what it can't do. And so even if you just kind of dive in, I think, with just like big, giant problems, you want to just have it kind of solve almost magically, it'll kind of start to show you, I think, like, oh, okay, these are the limitations. This was the value I got out of like starting with this AI tool, and then you can kind of see where you pick it up from there.
And one thing I would add, I think one thing a lot of people get caught up on is like treating it like a retrieval engine, meaning you're like asking it questions and you like want it to give you answers. That's actually something it's really bad at unless it has like proper context to be able to answer those questions. So like think about it more like a reasoning engine. So like one thing we found successful is we're able to pass in a framework for maybe how we think about analyzing the competitive advantage of a company, pass in that company's documents, and it's able to apply that framework to those documents. So it's able to reason through the framework and be able to apply that to something else. So there's, think about it more in terms of like reasoning and some like truly like basic intelligence, quote unquote, but reasoning rather than, just retrieval or search.
I also find it very useful for like data processing. As an engineer, the part I don't like is the data processing, where you have to sit down and sift through different things. So, for example, we organized a hackathon a few weeks ago, and we got the list of emails, but it wasn't formatted correctly, but I wanted it in a CSV. And normally, back in the day, or 2020, you would have to write like a script of like to take all that.
Remember what I said about being lazy?
I was lazy, and I just passed it into it, and it generated the CSV for me. I just downloaded it, then sent all of them emails.
And maybe that's both sides of the coins of what we're talking about right now, right? We can find ways of integrating this into the software itself, but also, selfishly for making our jobs easier. If I can't get types for a TypeScript REST API endpoint, let me drop that response in and get my types from that. So easy. I think we have time for one more question right there. Sorry.
Sorry, I beat you to the punch. To preface, I'm not an engineer. I have two questions. So, and they're pretty basic. The first one comes out of a fear of like, for example, I have an OpenAI API connected to something called Clay. Not sure if you've seen it before, but it's really used in sales and marketing. So, I have my CEO's credit card attached to the API, right? And I know it's pretty cheap, the credits. But I still have this fear of like, if you have this table of like thousands of companies and I'm doing research on it, racking up a bill. And the same thing outside of the company when I'm doing my own things, I don't know, like what is the framework for making sure you can control the costs, especially between like experimenting and then like deployment. Especially when you deploy it, it's going to scale, right? So it's like, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars of my own money that I don't have.
Yeah, so you can actually set up limits for the APIs on, ChatGPT's website or the OpenAI website. So you can have different API keys with different limits on how much you can spend for each one. So that's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty robust too. Like you can put in like alerts where like you can have it like, hey, once I've hit this dollar amount, I want to know about it. And then also alerts for like, hey, once I've hit this dollar amount, like we're done. Just turn off. So it'll let you fine grain that, or you can control that pretty fine grain, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, a few months ago, they released service accounts, which you can use to set budget for individual API keys. And you can say this thing is $10, and once it's done, I don't want to spend a dollar more. Also, I do think these things are going to get cheaper as they grow because they're just going to get built into everything, and where they're going to make their money is enterprise. It will get cheaper for the individuals or the small projects you're working on.
So we can be as lazy as we want. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming today, folks. That's actually the end of our time, which is remarkable how fast that went by. We're going to stick around here if you have any questions, want to come talk to us, and then we'll see everybody around. Thanks so much. Have a great Sloss Tech.
Thank you.
Thank you.